Most people think Amazon killed Sears. That's the easy version. Here's the real one. In 2007, Sears was worth $30 billion. Amazon was worth $17 billion. Sears was bigger. Sears was older. Sears had been selling things to Americans since before the automobile existed. One man destroyed it. His name is Eddie Lampert. He was a hedge fund manager. He had never run a store. He had never sold a product. He had never managed a single employee in retail. He bought Sears anyway. Then he became the CEO and the chairman of the board and the largest shareholder and the company's biggest lender, meaning Sears owed him money and he charged Sears interest on it. He sold off Land's End. He sold off Craftsman. He spun the real estate into a trust he controlled, then charged Sears rent on its own buildings. By the time it was over, Sears' own bankruptcy estate sued him. The lawsuit said he transferred more than $2 billion in assets to himself and his hedge fund. The lawsuit named his Yale roommate, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, as a co-defendant. 175,000 people lost their jobs. The pensions they'd been promised were dumped onto the federal government. The Craftsman tools their fathers had passed down to them were now owned by Stanley Black and Decker. And Eddie Lampert? He bought what was left of Sears out of bankruptcy court. He bought it back from himself. This is the story of America's first everything store, and of the man who bought it, stripped it, and sold it for parts. Chapter 1. The Catalogue. Before the internet, before shopping malls, before department stores even existed in most of America, there was the Sears catalog. In 1886, a 22-year-old railroad station agent named Richard Sears bought a shipment of pocket watches that a local jeweler refused to accept. He sold them to other station agents along the line. Within 6 months, he'd made $5,000, roughly $160,000 in today's money, selling watches he'd never planned to own. He recognized the pattern immediately. Rural Americans wanted things, good things, affordable things. But they lived miles from the nearest town, and the town's general store charged whatever it wanted because there was no competition. Farmers paid more for less, not because the products were better, because there was nowhere else to go. Sears solved this with paper, a catalogue, a list of everything a family could need: watches, tools, clothing, furniture, farm equipment, guns, sewing machines, eventually entire houses shipped in pieces, available by mail, at prices the general store couldn't match, delivered by the US Postal Service directly to the farm. By 1894, the catalogue was 507 pages. By 1900, annual sales exceeded $11 million. The Sears catalog became the second most widely distributed book in America after the Bible. In rural homes, it served both purposes: entertainment, aspiration, and when the pages were finally used up, bathroom supply. The catalog had a name that stuck: the Wish Book. Every fall, the new edition arrived. Children sat on the floor and circled what they wanted for Christmas. Parents studied the tool section and the appliance section. The catalog wasn't advertising. It was a window. For families who lived 20 miles from the nearest paved road, Sears showed them what existed in the wider world and offered to bring it to their door. Sears wasn't just a store, it was infrastructure. It connected rural America to the products of industrial America for the first time. Farmers who had never seen a washing machine could order one from page 312. A family in Nebraska could buy the same coat that a family in Chicago wore. The playing field between rural and urban, for the first time in American history, started to level. By the 1920s, Sears opened physical stores. By the 1960s, it accounted for roughly 1% of the entire US gross domestic product. One company, 1% of everything the country produced. The Sears Tower in Chicago, completed in 1973, was the tallest building in the world. They named the tallest building in the world after a department store. That's how dominant Sears was. Allstate Insurance, started by Sears. Discover Credit Card, started by Sears. Coldwell Banker Real Estate, owned by Sears. Dean Witter Financial Services, owned by Sears. Kenmore Appliances, Craftsman Tools, Die Hard Batteries. These weren't just products, they were brands that American families built their lives around. A Craftsman wrench came with a lifetime warranty. If it broke, you walked into a Sears, and they handed you a new one. No receipt, no questions. That was the deal. 300,000 employees at its peak. Stores in every major city, a catalogue in every farmhouse, a brand name on the tallest building on earth. The world was changing, and Sears was not. Chapter 2. The Slowdown. Walmart opened its first store in 1962. Target in 1962. Kmart in 1962. All three launched the same year. Sears didn't notice or didn't care. They were the largest, the oldest, the most trusted. The new discount chains were beneath them. Sears kept doing what it had always done: broad selection, house brands, full-service departments, financial services, real estate, insurance. They were everything to everyone. Being everything to everyone only works when there is nobody who is better at any one thing. By the 1980s, specialists were arriving in every category. Walmart beat Sears on price. Home Depot beat Sears on hardware selection. Best Buy beat Sears on electronics. Nordstrom beat Sears on apparel quality. Each specialist took a piece, and each piece taken made Sears a little less essential. Revenue peaked in 1992 at $59 billion. Then it started falling. Slowly at first. A percentage point here, a closed store there. The catalogue, the thing that started everything, was discontinued in 1993. The company that invented mail-order shopping stopped doing mail-order shopping 1 year before Jeff Bezos founded Amazon. Sears started shedding weight. The tower was sold. Allstate was spun off. Dean Witter went to Morgan Stanley. Coldwell Banker was separated. Each spin-off was described as focusing on core retail. Each one removed a profitable asset and left Sears more dependent on the department stores, which were the weakest part of the business. Sears was still enormous, still had millions of loyal customers, still had the brands, Kenmore, Craftsman, Die Hard, that carried generational trust, still had some of the best commercial real estate in America, and it still had the institutional knowledge of direct-to-consumer selling that had been built over a century. The pieces were there. A competent retail operator could have taken Sears' catalog infrastructure, the warehousing, the fulfillment, the customer data, and built an e-commerce platform 10 years before Amazon figured it out. Sears had the physical stores that could serve as distribution hubs. Sears had the service network, auto centers, appliance repair, installation teams, that gave it a relationship with customers that Amazon could never replicate. What Sears needed was someone who saw these pieces and knew how to reassemble them for the digital age. What Sears got was a man who saw the pieces and knew exactly how much each one was worth individually. Chapter 3. The Hedge Fund Manager. Eddie Lampert was born in 1962. He grew up in Roslyn, New York. His father died when he was 14. He attended Yale, where his roommate was Stephen Mnuchin, who would later become Treasury Secretary under Donald Trump. After Yale, Lampert worked at Goldman Sachs. Then, at 25, he started his own hedge fund, ESL Investments, named after his initials. The fund generated returns above 25% annually in its early years. Investors included Michael Dell and David Geffen. Fortune magazine compared Lampert to Warren Buffett. In 2003, Lampert was kidnapped. 4 men grabbed him outside his hedge fund's office in Greenwich, Connecticut, forced him into an SUV, and held him in a motel for more than a day. He talked his way out. The kidnappers were caught. It's an extraordinary detail in an extraordinary life, and it tells you something about the kind of mind you're dealing with. A man who can negotiate his way out of a hostage situation. The question is not whether Lampert was intelligent. He was. The question is whether intelligence alone qualifies someone to run the largest department store chain in American history. In 2003, Lampert's hedge fund bought a controlling stake in Kmart, which was in bankruptcy. He acquired the shares at a steep discount. In 2005, he merged Kmart and Sears into Sears Holdings Corporation. The merger was valued at $11 billion. Lampert became chairman of the board. Eventually, he became CEO. He was now simultaneously the company's largest shareholder, its chairman, its chief executive, and through ESL's loans to the company, its largest creditor. He had never managed a retail store, he had never run a supply chain, he had never hired a floor associate. He ran the company from his home in Miami, over 1,000 miles from Sears headquarters in Illinois. His philosophy was simple and public. He said he would transform Sears the way Buffett had transformed Berkshire Hathaway, by allocating capital intelligently, cutting waste, and letting the assets compound. Sears was not Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire owns companies and lets them run themselves. Sears was a single company that needed to be operated, stores restocked, employees trained, shelves reorganized, technology updated, customers served. It needed a retailer, it got an investor. And an investor sees assets differently than an operator. An operator sees a store and thinks, how do I make this store better? An investor sees a store and thinks, what is this store worth if I sell it? Lampert saw Sears and saw a portfolio of assets. The question he was asking was never, how do I save Sears? The question was, how do I extract the maximum value from each asset before the whole thing collapses? Chapter 4. The Dismantling. The asset sales began almost immediately. Each one had a rational justification. Each one removed something valuable from the company. 2011. Sears sold Orchard Supply hardware. A healthy chain with a loyal customer base. Gone. 2012. Sears spun off Sears Hometown and Outlet stores. The small format locations that served rural communities, the last echo of the original catalog company, separated from the parent. 2012. Sears partially spun off Sears Canada. The Canadian division later liquidated entirely. Workers in Canada lost their jobs and much of their pension benefits. 2014. Sears spun off Lands' End. This was one of the most profitable brands in the portfolio. An outside investor, Leonard Green and Partners, had offered more than $1 billion for it. The board, controlled by Lampert, rejected the offer. Instead, Lands' End was spun off to existing shareholders, and since ESL was the largest shareholder, Lampert and his hedge fund received nearly half the new company at no cost. 2015. Sears created Seritage Growth Properties, a real estate investment trust. This was the critical move. Sears transferred 235 of its best properties into Seritage. Lampert's entities took a major stake. Sears, the company, no longer owned those buildings. Sears, the retailer, still operated stores in those buildings. It now paid rent to a trust controlled by its own chairman. The rent was $134 million per year. Money that had previously stayed inside the company now flowed out to Seritage, which Lampert controlled. 2017. Sears sold the Craftsman brand to Stanley Black & Decker for $900 million. Craftsman, the brand that had offered a lifetime warranty, the brand that grandfathers passed down to sons, the brand that meant something permanent, was sold. The $900 million went to pay down debt. Debt that was owed in large part to Lampert's own hedge fund. Each sale followed the same logic. Sell the asset. Use the proceeds to service debt. The debt is owed to ESL. The money flows to Lampert. The company gets smaller. The debt gets serviced. Repeat until there is nothing left to sell. The company shrank. The debt did not shrink at the same rate. The rent to Seritage did not shrink at all. The advisory fees did not shrink at all. The fixed costs stayed fixed while the revenue base collapsed. Former employees described watching it happen in real time. Stores that hadn't been renovated in a decade. Departments with more empty shelves than full ones. Fitting rooms that were locked because there wasn't enough staff to monitor them. The HVAC systems that hadn't been serviced. The lights that flickered. The parking lots with weeds growing through the cracks. Sears didn't look like a company being restructured. It looked like a company being abandoned. Chapter 5. The Bogus Plans. The lawsuit filed by Sears' bankruptcy estate contains a detail that separates this story from every other corporate failure. According to the complaint, Lampert personally directed Sears employees to create financial projections showing that the company would return to profitability. These projections were presented to creditors, to the board, to suppliers, and to the public. The lawsuit calls them fanciful bad faith predictions. The plans showed Sears turning a dramatic corner, from billions in losses to sudden profitability. They were used to justify continued lending, continued supplier relationships, continued operations. Meanwhile, the actual trajectory was clear to anyone who looked. Revenue fell every single year, from $53 billion in 2006 to $16.7 billion in 2018. The company lost $7.1 billion between 2011 and 2014 alone. The projections said things would get better. The numbers said they wouldn't. The projections existed, according to the lawsuit, not to plan a real turnaround, but to justify the continued transfer of assets. Because if creditors believed Sears was going to recover, they would continue lending. If suppliers believed Sears was going to recover, they would continue shipping product. If employees believed Sears was going to recover, they would continue showing up to work. Everyone had to believe the turnaround was coming. Because if they stopped believing, the extraction would stop too. So the plans kept being produced, the assets kept being sold, the money kept flowing to ESL, the stores kept deteriorating, the employees kept showing up to buildings that were falling apart because they had been told on paper that better days were coming. Better days were not coming. Chapter 6, October 15th, 2018. Sears Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on October 15, 2018. The company listed approximately $6.9 billion in debt against $6.7 billion in assets. Lampert stepped down as CEO the same day. He did not walk away. In January 2019, Lampert's hedge fund submitted a $5.2 billion bid to acquire what remained of Sears out of bankruptcy. The bid proposed keeping roughly 400 stores open and preserving up to 50,000 jobs. Unsecured creditors, the suppliers, the landlords, the pension fund, fought the deal. They argued that Lampert was the reason Sears was in bankruptcy, and that allowing him to buy it back was rewarding the person who had destroyed it. The bankruptcy judge approved the sale. Eddie Lampert, through an affiliate of his hedge fund, bought Sears. The company he had spent 13 years dismantling, he bought it back. The man who had transferred billions in assets out of the company now owned whatever was left. He bought it for $5.2 billion. 13 years earlier, the merger that created Sears Holdings had been valued at $11 billion. In the intervening years, Lampert had sold off Land's End, Craftsman, Orchard Supply, Sears Canada, Sears Hometown, and 235 of the best properties. He had collected advisory fees, interest payments, and rent. Then he bought the shell for less than half of what it had been worth before he started. From 2,705 stores at its peak in 2011 to roughly 400 after the bankruptcy sale. Today, in 2026, the number of remaining Sears stores in the United States is 5. Chapter 7. The People. At its peak, Sears employed more than 300,000 people. By the time of the bankruptcy filing, that number was below 90,000. The total job losses across the Lampert era exceeded 175,000. Many of those workers had spent decades with the company. Sears was the kind of employer that people built careers at, not just jobs. Department managers who started as stock clerks in their 20s and retired in their 60s. Appliance technicians who knew every Kenmore refrigerator model by serial number. Auto center mechanics who had serviced the same family's cars for 15 years. Sears wasn't just where they worked. For a lot of these people, Sears was the identity on their business card, the logo on their retirement plaque, the answer they gave when someone asked what they did for a living. These employees had been promised pensions. Sears' pension obligations totaled more than $1.5 billion. When the company went bankrupt, those obligations were transferred to the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, the federal agency that backstops failed private pensions, which means taxpayers absorbed the liability. The workers who had earned those pensions by showing up for decades received reduced benefits. The hedge fund that had spent 13 years extracting value from the company was a secured creditor, ahead of the pension fund in the bankruptcy line. Secured creditors get paid first. Unsecured creditors, including the pension fund, get whatever's left. The hierarchy of bankruptcy law guaranteed that ESL's claims would be addressed before the workers' retirements. The Craftsman lifetime warranty, the handshake agreement that had defined the brand for generations, was no longer honored by the new owner, Stanley Black & Decker, in the same unconditional way. The wrench your grandfather gave you, the wrench that came with a promise that it would be replaced forever, no questions asked. That promise died with the company that made it. And the stores themselves, the places where communities had gathered for generations, where families had bought their first washing machine and their kids' first bicycle, and the Craftsman tool set that got passed down from father to son, became empty buildings. Then they became parking lots. Then they became something else entirely. Chapter 8. The Original Amazon. Here is the part that should make your blood pressure rise. In 1886, Richard Sears started a mail order business that delivered products directly to customers who lived too far from stores. He built a catalog that contained everything. He built a logistics network that reached every address in America. He built a customer database of millions of families and their purchasing habits. In 1994, Jeff Bezos started a mail order business that delivered products directly to customers who lived too far from stores. He built a website that contained everything. He built a logistics network that reached every address in America. He built a customer database of millions of families and their purchasing habits. Sears had the catalog infrastructure. Sears had the customer data. Sears had the brand trust. Sears had the physical stores that could have served as distribution hubs a decade before Amazon built its first warehouse. Sears was Amazon before Amazon existed. The company had every ingredient it needed to dominate e-commerce. It had them first. It had them for 100 years. Sears did not build the internet version of itself. By the time the internet mattered, Eddie Lampert was in charge. And Lampert was not interested in building. He was interested in selling. You cannot build the future of a company while simultaneously auctioning off its past. And that is exactly what happened. Amazon's market cap today exceeds $2 trillion. Sears has 5 stores. The distance between what Sears could have been and what Sears became is the distance between a company that invested in its future and a company whose owner sold the future to pay himself. Chapter 9. What Remains. The Sears Tower was renamed Willis Tower in 2009. Most Chicagoans still call it the Sears Tower. The name persists the way a scar persists, visible, recognized, attached to something that no longer exists in the form people remember. The catalog is gone. It was discontinued in 1993. The stores are almost gone. 5 remain in the United States as of 2026. 5. Down from 2,705 at peak. That is a 99.8% reduction. If you want to visit a Sears today, you need to know where to look and you need to drive. The brands have been scattered. Kenmore appliances are still manufactured, but the name carries less weight than it once did. Craftsman belongs to Stanley Black and Decker. Die-Hard batteries are licensed out. Land's End is independent. Allstate is a Fortune 100 company on its own. Discover Card is worth more by itself than all of Sears Holdings was at the time of bankruptcy. The parts survived. Every single piece that was cut off from the body is doing fine. The body is dead. This is the clearest evidence that Sears' failure was not a failure of the underlying businesses. It was a failure of the entity that held them together. Or more precisely, it was the intentional dismantling of the entity by the person who controlled it. The real estate, 235 properties transferred to Seritage Growth Properties, has been slowly redeveloped. And here is the detail that makes the story almost too perfect. Some of the former Sears locations have been converted into Amazon distribution centers. The buildings where Americans once browsed Craftsman tools and Kenmore washing machines now house the robots that pack boxes for the company that replaced them. The original Amazon is now literally inside Amazon. Eddie Lampert settled the lawsuit brought by Sears's bankruptcy estate in 2022 for $175 million. He admitted no wrongdoing. Of the $175 million, $125.6 million came from insurance. $41.9 million came from the defendants. The workers whose pensions were dumped onto the federal government received nothing additional from the settlement. Lampert still controls what remains of Sears through a company called Transformco. The company's primary activity, as far as public records indicate, is managing and selling the remaining real estate assets. It is not building stores, it is not serving customers, it is not honoring lifetime warranties, it is selling what's left. The slow-motion liquidation that started in 2005 is still underway. It just has a different name now. Richard Sears was a railroad agent who found a box of watches that nobody wanted. He sold them. He saw the pattern. Rural Americans needed access to the same products that city Americans had. He built the infrastructure to deliver it, not a store, but a system, a catalogue, a warehouse, a delivery network, a guarantee. The system connected millions of people to the economy for the first time. It changed how America shopped. It changed how America lived. 119 years later, a hedge fund manager looked at everything Richard Sears had built and saw a balance sheet. He saw assets that could be sold, brands that could be spun off, real estate that could be transferred, debt that could be collected. He didn't see customers. He didn't see communities. He didn't see the mechanic who'd serviced Kenmore refrigerators for 30 years, or the grandfather who handed his grandson a Craftsman wrench and said, "This one's guaranteed for life." He saw a portfolio, and he liquidated it. He sold Land's End, he sold Craftsman, he sold the real estate, he sold the catalogue, he sold everything that had value, kept everything that didn't, and when the shell finally collapsed, he bought it back out of bankruptcy court for less than half of what it had been worth when he started. He sold America's store for parts, and when there was nothing left to sell, he bought the parts back.